Hi, Robert.
Hey Tia, how are you doing?
I'm good. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited for everyone to learn from you.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to be here. I can't promise anyone any learning, but I'm thrilled for the opportunity.
Let's try.
Yeah.
You are a leading voice and an expert and someone who pushes the coaching industry. And I would like to hear your perspective on why every single person listening and every single person in business and organizations today should prioritize and value coaching in the workplace.
Wow. It's a good question and it's a big question. I've been involved with coaching for a little more than 20 years, so I'm not the first person to this particular industry, but I have been around a bunch. I'll be honest, in the beginning, I was sort of embarrassed to be a coach, in part because life coaching at that time seemed like this pretty fluffy, unregulated thing.
Yes.
And executive coaching seemed to be this very rarefied, only for the privileged few type of thing.
CEOs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then there was this sort of, middle management coaching that was very remedial, that was almost like being sent to the headmaster's office. Like, you're doing
Right.
something wrong, you better go get a coach to
Right.
fix you.
We're managing you out. This is the last straw. Yeah.
Exactly. So so I wasn't very comfortable with any of those things, but I think that coaching has grown and evolved quite a bit over the last couple of decades. And fundamentally, coaching is just sort of a philosophy. That is, it's a way of believing in another person, trusting them, trusting that they have experience under their belt, the capacity to come up with their own solutions, not guaranteeing those solutions will work, but that they're just smart people that understand their own context, that can come up with their own solutions. And in coaching, you're just kind of joining with them and exploring how they might go about doing that. But
Mhm.
and trusting that they're an expert in their own, sphere of influence. I
Mhm.
think that's very helpful in organizations because, frankly, it changes the tenor of conversations, management conversations in particular. I was just training in Singapore this last week, and an executive level manager said, "Oh, this week I just asked questions to my supervisees, and it was amazing. It turns out they had answers, and they had good answers and thoughtful answers, and the nature of the conversation was better. And I sort of respected them better and I trusted them more. And I think that's what coaching does for us. And I think that that's a pretty big promissory note."
Yes. Yes. And there is a shift and it's so different from leadership styles in the past, and some people still leading this way, which is authoritative, directive, telling, prescriptive, feeling like you know the answers because you might have been in the industry for 15 years and you've been successful. So what advice do you have for people who haven't formally been trained? They're an executive, they're a leader, they haven't formally been trained in coaching. Maybe they haven't even had a coach themselves, yet they are open to this idea of, or I should say, this style of communication with the people that work for them.
Yeah, good question. There's a lot of small pieces of advice. I mean, I don't think you have to 100% go out and drop thousands of dollars and go through a formal coach training program and get certification, because for most people, they're just going to retain their current role as a manager. And what they're going to do is incorporate coach like skills rather than
Mhm.
become, an independent practitioner coach.
Right, right.
So I think just getting a taste spoon, picking up a good coaching book, an introduction to coaching skills type of book, um, And most of them are going to say things like, this is inquiry based. You want to be able to ask better questions. You want to be able to listen better, and you want to trust the person that they can come up with some ideas to try. Whether or not those ideas work, they're going to be worth trying out and experimenting with. I would say that's sort of step one. I do think,
Mhm.
as you just suggested, getting a coach, and a good coach, can be helpful. And I would also add this caveat that traditionally coaching has been very performance driven. Come work with me and we're going to see if we can, notch up those sales numbers. We can, really get you essentially to, grind yourself into dust for better
Mhm.
performance. So I don't
Yes.
think that it should be around goals at any cost. I think it should be goals, but not at the cost of well-being. And I think increasingly that's a really important part of a coaching conversation. Sort of, what are you trying to accomplish? And how are you going to accomplish it while not sacrificing too much well-being? So how do you bring the best of yourself, but how do you bring the best of yourself without sacrificing all of you?
Obviously, I completely agree. And when people's well-being is not at a level that is supportive of them in their personal life and professional life, their performance is going to suffer and they'll have less of a chance to achieve those business goals. So this is the perfect segue into happiness. So for people listening that are struggling a little bit with their well-being, whether it be their mental and psychological health, could be their physical health, could be relationships, um, different aspects of their lives. What advice do you have for, because there's a lot. If you think about the science of happiness and positive psychology, there is so much. If you were starting off with someone that's saying, yeah, I'm struggling at different areas, I don't feel very balanced, and my happiness is not where I know it could be or where it used to be, what advice do you have?
I have some advice,
It's
and
another big
I
question.
I think it's in some ways going to be non-traditional advice. There is this whole science of positive psychology, and we have tested these various tools and interventions that are helpful for happiness, and I'm not in any way trying to undercut those. But sometimes just offering someone that as a piece of advice, it's like coming into their home and saying, here's how I think you ought to decorate. Well, that might be nice, but it might not be what they would prefer or consistent with their own values, or how they want to decorate.
Mhm.
So I'm very reluctant to say, oh, you should go just write down 3 things you're grateful for, even though there's a science that shows that kind of gets you to focus on positive things. For some people, that's going to work beautifully. But here's what I think, Tia. If I ask people, just go out and engage in some stuff that you think will make you happy, they're going to go to sports events and barbecues and their kids play, and they're going to have pretty good instincts about it.
Mhm.
They don't need me to recommend barbecue to them. They already know that. So instead, I think the conversation is, do you give yourself time to do this? Do you give yourself permission to do this? And do you have a language for what it is you're trying to do? And I think that really is where my advice, such that it is, comes in. That we all have the same amount of time. The objective clock time is the same for you, for the busiest executive, for the janitor who works at the organization. How are you using that time? How are you prioritizing well-being? Do you think well-being is worth prioritizing? Do you see it paying off in certain ways? Do you believe that it recharges you so that you can work more? Do you believe that it's a good in its own right, that it's what makes life worth living, having enjoyable and meaningful experiences? And do you just have a language for understanding it? Like, are you shooting for enjoyment? Are you shooting for enthusiasm? Are you shooting for growth? Are you shooting for meaning? What is it you're doing when you're going about the business of working on your own well-being?
So valuable. What I notice with many people is that there is an internal struggle because they are very driven in their careers. And there is a woman, an executive woman that I talked to last week at a very large company who is working about 12 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and works about 7 hours on Sunday, isn't spending enough time with friends and family or sleep, exercise, barbecue, like you said, which is such a perfect example that people can relate to, because there is a drive to be successful, and it's what everyone around her is doing.
Mhm.
Yet she's not as happy as she could be, and she said it, and is struggling with balance of so much work, and doesn't see how to not, let's call it the hamster wheel.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's a great case study. I'm curious what you said to her.
So I asked her about because she said she has this goal of more balance and more happiness. And I asked her what would, for you, because I couldn't assume, what it was for her, what does that look like for you? Tell me about it. If you had that, let's just say it 6 months from now and you're working on it, and she described it very quickly in extreme detail, exactly what she wants, but she doesn't have right now. And the answer wasn't, I quit my job. Her answer came about boundaries and time usage and saying no to things and scheduling things in her calendar, non-work, having clear communication to her executive boss. She
Yeah.
answered it quite quickly.
It's funny. I mean, you brought up so many things that were time related, right? It was time, schedule, all of that. And something that I really am sort of tickled by recently. So I just mentioned that we all have the same amount of time, right?
Yes.
But subjective time, this how we experience time, is very different. And I think it can be helpful for people to realize that not all time is the same. So, the day 5 days before your birthday feels a whole lot different than your birthday. Even though those are both just days,
Mhm.
your birthday kind of feels like a different day. Like that period of time,
Absolutely.
there's a special quality to it.
Yes.
I think the hour that I'm waiting at the airport to board a plane feels a lot kind of sludgier and slower and less gratifying than a different hour that
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
spending.
I feel like
So
weekends go so slow compared to weekdays. When
exactly.
I'm
So
with my two
I just
girls, time, like an
I'm
hour feels like 4 hours on a Tuesday.
exactly. So I love that you use the word slow. So this is something that I realize out of coaching, and it's this idea of slow time. So people are really busy, of course, at work. They're rushing from meeting to meeting. There's a lot of pressure. There's deadlines. There's schedules, and it feels really rigid and structured. You step into a coaching session, and for that half hour, 45 minutes, hour, whatever it is, it's almost like normal clock time stops, and it's a subjective sense of abundance. Like, we've a lot of time in here. And as a
Mhm.
coach, when I see the hour starting to be up, in the old days I used to think like, oh, well, we only have 5 minutes left. And now I sort of think the opposite, like, wow, we still have 5 minutes left. And you can accomplish a lot in 5 minutes. Imagine that someone gave you 5 minutes of free time right now. You'd be like, oh, that's cool.
Mm.
So why would I treat it like it's a scarcity at the end of a coaching session and not treat it like it's 5 glorious minutes? And once you start kind of taking that variable time and that slow time attitude, I think it just changes both how much gets sucked out of you at work,
Mhm.
and just how you're appreciating those moments.
Mhm. Yes. I believe that many, many people think, feel, and believe that time is a scarcity,
Mhm.
right?
That's right.
Absolutely. Like they're like, it's not enough. Even the phrase I'm so busy, or the phrase I'm not enough time, or I don't have enough time for this, I don't have enough time for this, I don't have time for this. Yet there are some beautiful humans on earth that do not feel that way and are being very intentional, being very present, mindful, and have a very different relationship with time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think this time and scarcity is hurting us a lot, psychologically, emotionally, that, and this rushing, like, and I get people, oh, sorry, I was 5 minutes late to this Zoom because I just got off another Zoom. I'm like, oh my gosh, let's come back in 5 minutes. Like, go,
Totally.
that it's taking away. I think of something Dr. Ben-Shahar said about, the quantity of experiences that we have does not equal the quality. It's like I don't know, what's coming up for me is like, how do we take out and remove so that there is more slow time?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's such a great point. First, let's be honest, there are times that you have to rush. There are times that you're running late or whatever. And that I think that's legitimate to sometimes feel rushed. I don't want to pretend to listeners that, oh, you're just going to be in this Zen-like state all the time without ever a care in the world.
Right.
But being able to distinguish between the few times where you're legitimately under pressure and rushing, and the rest of the time where you're legitimately not.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I coach people, for example, I notice that just my own sense of abundance, my own sense that we have a whole hour and we can accomplish so much in an hour, has this kind of ironic effect that it gets me to slow down, that I'm not trying to pack in a million things into that hour. I'm just like, oh, let's take our time. If you need a minute to compose yourself, fine. When I ask my coaching clients a question, I'm like, if you need to take notes for a minute before answering out loud that you just need to reflect, let's take that time. Like, no problem. We have so much time here.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see the spillover effect on them, that they feel like, wow, I just don't have this kind of quality in my day
Mm-hmm.
where I feel the permission to take time to think before I speak, or to just sit back and sort of do nothing for a moment. And the cool thing is you can do that with 30 seconds or with 3 minutes or with 5 minutes. You don't need an extra 5 hours in your day.
No.
The 5 minutes is enough.
Mm-hmm. For every single leader that's listening, whether you have one person that works with you or a very, very large team, this is such a huge gift that you can give people, knowing that everyone is in this busy state and has phones and their computers and so many distractions coming at them at all time, that when you have those one-on-one and even those team meetings when everyone is together, is to just create space and allow everyone, like, it doesn't have to be filled. And when you were talking in your keynote about listening and talking about culturally, when there is silence in our culture, everyone fills it. And then in a lot of cultures, it's no, that there's this respect for pause and respect for silence, that leaders can lead this and allow people's heart rate to slow down, allow people's mind to slow down. And I can't help but think, just like in a one-on-one, right? When you do this as a group, people are going to think differently. There's going to be creativity, there's going to be innovation, and everyone's stress level and cortisol is going to come down too.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is a brilliant point you're bringing up, Tia, and it's actually quite counterintuitive because it has nothing to do with the objective amount of time. So if you had a one-on-one and you only have 12 minutes for it, or as I think of it, wow, 12 minutes for it. I think it is, you called it a gift, right? That like, when you walk in, I'm going to put my phone away. I'm going to say, hey, for this 12 minutes, you are the center of attention. I'm giving you my fully focused and undivided attention. And this 12 minutes is ours. And you really do demonstrate to that person that this time is good, valuable, valid time, and that they're the most important person in the world for those 12 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't have 50 other things that I want to go do instead.
I'm not like also looking at my inbox that, oh, this is coming in. Yeah. And that you care and that they're valuable. And there's a challenge, what I'm also hearing a lot of, people feeling connected with still a lot of people doing virtual, of course, and some hybrid and all of this. That what's amazing is that this doesn't have to happen in person. I mean, all the coaching I have had as a coachee and the coaching I've done to other people has been over the phone. I've actually never well, when I was a director of sales and marketing, okay, I did it in person, but this is beautifully done virtually, internationally, and that it solves that connection piece that a lot of people are not feeling like there's enough of in the world of work right now.
Yeah, absolutely. People were complaining quite a bit about digital meetings and saying, oh, there's fatigue around it.
Yes.
And I usually said, I don't think the in-person meetings were all that great. I think it's meeting fatigue. I don't think it has to do with it being digital. I think once you start changing the quality of the presence, the interaction, the listening, that's whether it's digital or not, that's the difference maker.
There's a great short fable that I've read, and it's called Death by Meeting. It's a fantastic book for any people that have had leaders that just like are so meeting happy. I want to come back to the permission piece around time, happiness, balance, intentionality. Tell me a little bit more about what this means and how someone could know, am I giving myself permission or not?
Yeah. So there are a million very sensible, legitimate reasons why people don't give themselves permission to focus on their well-being. So I'm not criticizing anyone if that's the case. Some people are self-sacrificing. They just want to help others first. That's a very reasonable, kind of desire to have. Some people want to perform well at work, so they're just prioritizing that over well-being, right? And they think that well-being might be selfish. It might be superficial. There's just a lot of reasons to put well-being on the back burner. The truth is, well-being is restorative. Well-being, we know people don't need me to tell them all the benefits, but they're, better customer evaluations, supervisor evaluations, more likely to get promoted, more likely to earn more. It's associated with, I think, taking fewer sick days, for example.
Absolutely.
A lot of the bottom line kind of measures that people in organizations certainly would care about. But an interesting thing is, one of the things that restores us from work is actually severing our mental connection to work. So, going home and checking your email, you're just still doing work. You're just in a different location, but you haven't actually stepped away from it. So you haven't really worked on this sort of restorative well-being. And there can be a real temptation like, yeah, but I don't have time for that. I need to be plugged into work. I was working with doctors and leaders in a hospital system, and they all said to a person, when I took time off and I trusted my team to do what my team does well anyway, and I literally didn't check my email and I literally didn't make myself available, and I took time off, not only was it truly restorative to me, but it engendered greater trust to my team because I saw they could cope with it.
Yes. If your leader is always breathing virtually or in, yeah, you don't feel like there's confidence in that autonomy. And
Yeah. And one of the things those leaders were saying, they weren't like, oh, I don't trust people and I just want to micromanage them. They were just saying, hey, I just want to make myself available to them
right.
to answer questions.
I
And
want to be
that's
available. I think that's a very valuable, I think many people, team members and leaders want to feel like my team can trust me. You can count on me. I'm here for you.
exactly. So it's very well intentioned, but by making yourself available 24/7, even on vacation, you're missing the opportunity to do what vacation is intended to do.
Right. Restore. So for everyone listening, to take time to pause, whether you're talking to someone else or you're journaling about this, but if you're not giving yourself permission right now to reflect on how come, without, being super critical, without being judgmental, with kindness and compassion of what are the reasons you're not, and what could be possible if on an ongoing basis you were restoring, whether that be hiking, reading, sleeping, at a barbecue. What could that do for you?
And sometimes it can even be a 5-minute break. I mean,
Yeah.
it can be those big breaks, but sometimes it could be stepping outside the office building for five
Yes.
minutes,
Yes.
just like redirecting your attention to something completely different.
Yes. And I think a huge part of this is believing that you can be very successful in your career and you can thrive professionally and prioritize your well-being, because I believe a lot of people think it's one or the other. One is going to suffer,
Yeah.
so it's like because
Yeah.
culturally we don't, I don't know, there's a lot of examples, like think of Mr. Elon Musk and others, right, where it's like, no, you hustle, you grind, that's the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And we might think that's the American way, or there are certain cultures, and I do think the United States is one of them, that has the hard work. And I'm certainly not opposed to hard work.
No, you work hard. I know that you do. Look, yeah.
Yeah, but I also think if you look at other cultures, they take slightly longer lunches, there's siestas, you see slightly different ways of doing things, and those cultures also have very successful people in them.
Yeah, no, I can't help. Of course, I think of Denmark. So, yeah, I think that's a great point of recognizing how much of it is culture and from society, and there isn't just one way, that there are different ways.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, Robert, I could talk to you for 7 more hours, but we can't. For people that want to learn about your many different books and your talks and the articles you've written, and just learn more about you, where is the best place for people to find you and connect with you?
Sure. So to learn about speaking, consulting, coaching, and my newest book, robertdiener.com. And I assume you'll provide the link.
Yes.
And then all my coach training kind of stuff is at positiveacorn.com.
Perfect. Thank you for coming on the Arrive at Happy show, and hopefully I'll see you in person soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.